In a quiet little neighborhood, where the grass was always green and the houses looked like they belonged in a magazine, there lived a woman named Sarah Bennett. She wasn't flashy or loud. She was just an ordinary mom trying her best to give her kids a good life. Sarah had 2 children, a teenage son named Jake, who spent most of his time buried in video games, and a sweet little girl named Lily, whose laughter could light up even the darkest days. Life hadn't been easy for Sarah. She worked long hours at a local cafe to make ends meet, but she loved her family more than anything. The neighborhood itself was the kind of place people dreamed about when they thought of suburban living. Every house was painted in soft pastel colors, with white picket fences lining perfectly trimmed lawns. There was a small park in the center of the community, complete with swings, slides, and benches shaded by towering oak trees. It was peaceful, safe, and exactly what Sarah wanted for her kids after years of moving around. But beneath its picturesque surface, this neighborhood had one major problem: Karen Whitmore. Karen was the head of the Homeowners Association, HOA, which meant she was in charge of enforcing all the rules that kept the neighborhood looking so perfect. To some, Karen might have seemed like a helpful neighbor, always ready to lend advice or organize community events. But to others, she was something else entirely, a nosy busybody who thrived on control. People whispered behind closed doors about how Karen would march up to someone's house if their mailbox was slightly crooked, or send passive-aggressive notes if someone dared to leave their trash cans out too long. She carried a clipboard everywhere she went, jotting down every minor infraction as though it were a federal crime. Sarah didn't know much about Karen when she first moved in. All she cared about was finding a stable home for her family. The rent was affordable, the schools were decent, and the neighbors seemed friendly enough, at least on the surface. But it didn't take long for Sarah to realize that Karen was going to be trouble. Within days of unpacking boxes, Sarah received her first warning letter from the HOA. Apparently, her curtains didn't match the approved color palette for the front windows. At first, Sarah tried to laugh it off. Who cared about curtains? But then came another letter, this time complaining about the toys scattered across her porch, then another about the weeds growing between the cracks in her driveway. Each note was signed with Karen's name, written in neat cursive handwriting that somehow felt colder than any typed message ever could. It was clear that Karen wasn't just doing her job. She was making sure everyone knew she was in charge. Despite the constant scrutiny, Sarah did her best to stay positive. She made friends with other moms in the neighborhood, many of whom shared her frustration with Karen's antics. They bonded over coffee mornings and playdates, swapping stories about the latest absurd complaint Karen had filed against them. One mom joked that Karen probably measured the height of their hedges with a ruler, while another claimed she timed how long it took for someone to remove holiday decorations after Christmas. These conversations helped lighten the mood, but deep down, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was watching her every move. What really set Karen apart from your average rule follower was her need to involve herself in everyone's business. If a car was parked in front of someone's house for too long, Karen would call the police. If a dog barked late at night, Karen would file a noise complaint before anyone else even noticed. And heaven forbid you forgot to mow your lawn one week. You'd wake up to find a neon orange notice taped to your door. Some people tried to stand up to her, but most eventually gave in because arguing with Karen was exhausting. She always found a way to twist things around until she came out looking like the hero. For Sarah, dealing with Karen became part of her daily routine. She learned to anticipate the next issue before it happened, whether it was trimming the bushes or reminding Jake not to skateboard on the sidewalk. Still, no matter how hard she tried, nothing seemed to satisfy Karen. Every victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the looming threat of yet another complaint. Sometimes Sarah wondered if Karen singled her out because she was new to the neighborhood, or maybe it was because Sarah was a single mom raising 2 kids on her own. Whatever the reason, it was clear that Karen saw her as someone worth targeting. But, despite all the stress, Sarah refused to let Karen ruin her life. She focused on creating happy memories with her children, taking them to the park whenever she had a free afternoon. It was during these moments that Sarah felt truly alive, watching, Lily swing higher and higher, or hearing Jake laugh as he chased pigeons across the grass. For a few precious hours each week, she could forget about Karen and the endless list of rules. The park was her sanctuary, a place where she could breathe without worrying about being judged. Little did Sarah know, however, that the park would soon become the setting for a nightmare far worse than anything Karen had done before. Because while Sarah saw it as a haven, Karen saw it as an opportunity, a chance to prove once and for all that she knew better than anyone else when it came to raising children. And in Karen's mind, knowing better meant having the right to step in no matter the cost. On a bright and sunny afternoon, Sarah decided it was the perfect day to take Lily to the park. The weather was just right, warm but not too hot, with a gentle breeze rustling through the trees. Lily had been begging to go for days, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny and pointing out the window every time she saw another child heading toward the swings. Sarah couldn't say no anymore. Between work shifts and errands, she hadn't spent as much quality time with her daughter as she'd wanted lately, so today felt like the perfect chance to make up for it. The park wasn't far from their house, just a short walk down the winding sidewalks that connected each cul-de-sac in the neighborhood. As they strolled hand in hand, Lily skipped happily beside her mom, chattering nonstop about everything she planned to do once they arrived. "I'm gonna swing super high," she announced, throwing her arms wide like an airplane. "And then, I'll slide down the big slide and maybe we can look for butterflies." Sarah smiled at her daughter's excitement, feeling grateful for these simple moments of joy. When they reached the park, Lily immediately ran off to claim her spot on the swings, while Sarah settled onto a nearby bench. She watched as her little girl pumped her legs furiously, giggling with delight as the swing soared higher and higher. A few other moms were scattered around the playground, chatting quietly or keeping an eye on their own kids. It was peaceful here, away from the stress of work and Karen's constant meddling. For a little while, at least, Sarah could relax. After a few minutes, one of the other moms approached Sarah's bench. Her name was Melissa, and though they weren't close friends, they'd exchanged pleasantries during previous visits to the park. Melissa's son was a year older than Lily, and he often played alongside her when they came at the same time. Today, Melissa plopped down beside Sarah, looking frazzled but cheerful. "Hey, Sarah," Melissa said, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "How are you holding up? Still dealing with Karen drama?" Sarah sighed, rolling her eyes playfully. "You know how it is. Just last week I got a note saying my welcome mat is visually distracting. Honestly, sometimes I think she spends more time spying on us than actually living her life." Melissa laughed. "Tell me about it. Did you hear she reported Mrs. Patel because her garden gnomes were too whimsical? I swear if I didn't need this neighborhood for my kid's school district, I'd move in a heartbeat." The two women continued talking, sharing stories and commiserating over Karen's antics. They joked about starting a support group for anyone who'd ever been targeted by her clipboard-wielding wrath. Meanwhile, Lily remained happily occupied on the swings, completely unaware of the grown-up conversation happening nearby. Occasionally, Sarah glanced over to check on her, ensuring she was safe and having fun. But then Sarah's phone buzzed loudly in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw that it was her boss calling. Work calls weren't unusual, even on her days off, but this one sounded urgent. Reluctantly, Sarah stood up from the bench and stepped a few feet away, apologizing to Melissa for interrupting their chat. "I'll be quick," she promised, flashing a reassuring smile before answering the call. Her boss launched into a detailed explanation about a scheduling mix-up that required immediate attention. Sarah nodded along, jotting down notes and offering solutions as best she could. Though she tried to keep the conversation brief, the issue was more complicated than expected, requiring several back-and-forth questions. Throughout the call, Sarah kept glancing toward the swings, making sure Lily was still visible. From where she stood, everything seemed fine. Her daughter was still swinging happily, her blonde pigtails flying behind her as she laughed. What Sarah didn't notice, however, was that someone else had entered the scene. Karen Whitmore had decided to take her daily walk through the park, her tiny white dog trotting obediently at her side. She carried her usual clipboard, though today it seemed less focused on HOA violations and more on observing the people around her. When Karen spotted Lily alone on the swings, her sharp eyes narrowed suspiciously. There was no adult standing directly next to the little girl, which immediately set off alarm bells in Karen's mind. Without hesitation, Karen strode over to the swing set, her heels clicking against the pavement. To anyone watching, she looked like a woman on a mission, a self-appointed guardian of morality and safety. Reaching Lily, she bent down slightly, placing a firm hand on the chain of the swing to stop it mid-air. Startled, Lily blinked up at the unfamiliar face, her smile fading into confusion. "Hi there, sweetie," Karen said in a tone that was meant to sound warm but came across as forced. "Where's your mommy?" Lily hesitated, unsure how to respond. She pointed vaguely in the direction of the benches where Sarah was still engrossed in her phone call. "Over there," she mumbled softly. Karen followed Lily's gesture but frowned when she didn't see anyone actively supervising the child. In her mind, this was unacceptable. Leaving a toddler unattended, even for a moment, was reckless and irresponsible. And Karen, being Karen, wasn't about to let such behavior slide. With a dramatic sigh, she grabbed Lily's hand firmly, pulling her off the swing. "You poor thing," Karen muttered under her breath, shaking her head disapprovingly. "Don't worry, I'll make sure you're safe." By the time Sarah hung up the phone and turned back toward the swings, panic surged through her chest. Lily was gone. The swing swayed gently in the breeze, empty and abandoned. Heart racing, Sarah scanned the playground frantically, searching for any sign of her daughter. Her eyes darted from the slide to the sandbox, from the jungle gym to the grassy area beyond. But there was no trace of Lily. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she spotted movement near the entrance of the park. Squinting, she recognized Karen's unmistakable figure, complete with her clipboard and designer sunglasses. And beside her, clutching Karen's hand tightly, was Lily. Relief washed over Sarah. At least her daughter was safe. But it quickly gave way to anger as she realized what was happening. Marching over, she called out sharply, "Karen, what are you doing with my daughter?" Karen turned slowly, her expression smug and self-righteous. "Oh, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'm surprised to see you here. I assumed you'd left her all alone." She gestured toward Lily, who looked uncomfortable and confused. This poor child was sitting unsupervised on the swings. Someone had to step in and ensure her safety. Sarah bristled at the accusation. "I wasn't gone for more than 5 minutes. I was right over there, answering a work call. You can't—" "Just grab my kid without asking." Karen raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. 5 minutes is plenty of time for something terrible to happen. "Honestly, Sarah, I expected better from you. Maybe if you weren't so distracted by your phone, you'd realize how dangerous it is to leave a child unattended." Sarah clenched, her fists fighting to stay calm. "That's ridiculous. She was perfectly fine until you decided to interfere. Now give her back." But instead of complying, Karen tightened her grip on Lily's hand and straightened her posture, as if preparing for battle. "I don't think so," she declared firmly. "If you can't handle basic parental responsibilities, then perhaps someone else should take care of her, for her own good." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. How dare Karen insinuate that she wasn't capable of raising her own child? Before she could respond, Karen turned on her heel and began walking briskly toward the exit, dragging Lily along with her. Sarah hurried after them, pleading desperately for her daughter back. But Karen refused to listen, her determination unwavering. As they neared the edge of the park, Karen stopped abruptly and spun around to face Sarah. With icy certainty, she delivered the line that would change everything. "I'm not giving her back to you. You're clearly unfit to care for her. Besides," she paused dramatically, "she looks exactly like my own daughter did at that age." For a moment, Sarah thought she must have misheard. Surely, Karen wasn't suggesting what it sounded like she was suggesting. But the look in Karen's eyes confirmed it. She truly believed she had some kind of claim over Lily. The absurdity of the situation made Sarah's head spin. This wasn't just about enforcing rules anymore. This was personal. And Karen wasn't going to back down without a fight. Sarah stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what Karen had just said. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and suffocating. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard. Surely, No one could say something so outrageous with a straight face. But there was Karen, standing tall with her clipboard clutched tightly in one hand and Lily's small fingers wrapped around the other, looking as though she truly believed she had some kind of moral high ground. "Are you serious right now?" Sarah finally managed to choke out, her voice trembling with disbelief. "She's my daughter, Karen, my child. You can't just take her because you don't approve of how I'm raising her." Karen tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable but undeniably smug. "Oh, Sarah," she said, her tone dripping with pity. "I know this must be hard for you to hear, but sometimes parents aren't equipped to handle the responsibilities that come with raising a child. Look at yourself. You're juggling work, trying to keep up with HOA rules, and clearly not paying enough attention to your own kid. It's exhausting, isn't it? Maybe you need help. Or maybe—" She paused dramatically, letting the weight of her next words sink in. Maybe someone else is better suited to care for her. The audacity of Karen's statement left Sarah speechless. How could anyone have the nerve to stand there and claim another person's child as their own? But Karen wasn't finished yet. With a flick of her wrist, she adjusted her sunglasses and continued, her voice steady and authoritative. "You might not see it now, but trust me, I'm doing this for Lily's sake. She deserves stability, structure, and a mother who can give her everything she needs. Someone who knows how to prioritize her well-being above all else." As if on cue, she glanced down at Lily, offering her a tight-lipped smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Everything will be okay." Lily, meanwhile, looked utterly bewildered. Her wide blue eyes darted between Sarah and Karen, unsure of what was happening or whom to trust. She tugged gently at Karen's grip, whispering, "I want my mommy." But Karen either ignored her plea or dismissed it altogether, tightening her hold instead. Sarah felt her heart shatter into pieces. This wasn't just about Karen being nosy or controlling anymore. This was a full-blown attack on her role as a mother. Every ounce of frustration, fear, and anger boiled inside her, threatening to spill over. Clenching her fists, she took a step closer to Karen, her voice rising sharply. "You have no right to do this," Sarah exclaimed, her words cutting through the tension like a knife. "You're not her mother, I am, and nothing you say changes that fact. Let her go, Karen. Right now." But Karen didn't flinch. If anything, she seemed emboldened by Sarah's reaction, feeding off the chaos she'd created. She crossed her arms over her chest, exuding an air of superiority that made Sarah's skin crawl. "This isn't about rights, Sarah. It's about what's best for Lily, and frankly, I don't think you're capable of making that decision yourself." At this point, a small crowd had begun to gather around them. Other parents who had been enjoying the park paused mid-conversation or playtime to watch the unfolding drama. Some looked concerned, others curious, and a few even appeared entertained by the spectacle. Whispers rippled through the group as people exchanged theories about what was going on. "Is that Karen from the HOA?" One woman murmured to her friend. "I heard she called CPS on someone last year," another replied knowingly. "Poor Sarah," a third chimed in. "That woman really doesn't know when to stop." Despite the growing audience, Sarah refused to back down. She locked eyes with Karen, her gaze unwavering. "You're insane," she spat, her voice shaking with fury. "Do you honestly think anyone here believes you? That you somehow magically became Lily's mom? You're delusional." Karen smirked, unfazed by the insult. "Insults won't solve anything, Sarah. If you're so sure you're fit to raise her, then prove it. Show everyone why you deserve to keep her." She gestured grandly toward the gathering crowd, as if inviting them to weigh in on the matter. "Go ahead. Tell them why you're such a wonderful mother." For a split second, Sarah hesitated. The spotlight suddenly felt blinding, and she realized how vulnerable she was in that moment. What could she say to convince strangers, who barely knew her, that she loved Lily more than life itself? That she worked tirelessly every day to provide for her children, even when it felt impossible? That she would die before letting anyone hurt her baby? But before she could respond, Karen cut her off. "See? You can't even defend yourself. That says everything we need to know." With those final words, Karen turned on her heel and began marching away, dragging Lily along with her. Sarah lunged forward instinctively, reaching out to grab her daughter's arm. "Let her go!" she shouted, tears streaming down her face. "She's mine!" Karen stopped abruptly and spun around, her expression cold and calculating. "If you touch me again, I'll call the police," she warned, her voice low and menacing. "And believe me, they'll side with whoever has the child's best interests at heart." The threat hung in the air like a guillotine blade, sharp and unyielding. Sarah froze, her hand still hovering in midair. She wanted to fight, to scream until someone listened. But deep down, she knew Karen was right about one thing. Involving the authorities would only make things worse. Without proof or allies, she risked losing Lily forever. Desperation clawed at Sarah's chest as she watched Karen disappear down the sidewalk, her tiny white dog trotting obediently beside her. Lily looked back once, her tear-streaked face breaking Sarah's heart into even smaller pieces. "Mommy!" she cried, her voice filled with panic. "Please." "I'll get you back, baby," Sarah whispered under her breath, though she doubted Lily could hear her. "I promise." As Karen rounded the corner and vanished from sight, the crowd slowly dispersed, leaving Sarah alone in the middle of the park. The laughter and chatter that had filled the space just moments ago were replaced by an eerie silence. Parents packed up their belongings and ushered their children away, casting sympathetic glances in Sarah's direction but offering no real help. They didn't want to get involved, not with someone as unpredictable as Karen. Sarah collapsed onto a nearby bench, her legs unable to support her any longer. Her chest heaved with sobs as the reality of the situation crashed down on her. She had always known Karen was difficult, maybe even cruel at times, but she never imagined things would escalate to this level. Who did Karen think she was, waltzing into her life and stealing her child like it was some twisted game? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Melissa, the mom she'd been talking to earlier. Sarah answered without thinking, her voice hoarse and broken. "Melissa, it's Karen. She took Lily. She says she's keeping her." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Melissa responded. "Oh my God, Sarah. Are you serious?" "Yes," Sarah choked out. "She claims I'm unfit to raise her. She's completely lost it." Melissa let out a shaky breath. "Okay, listen to me. Stay calm. We need to figure out what to do next. Do you have any proof that Lily's yours? Like birth certificates or pictures?" Sarah nodded, though Melissa couldn't see her. "Yeah, I have all that stuff at home, but what good will it do? She's already taken her." "We'll figure it out," Melissa reassured her. "First, we need to document everything. What happened today, what Karen said, anything that might help us prove she's lying. Then, we'll contact the police and file a report. You can't let her get away with this." Though Melissa's words offered a sliver of hope, Sarah couldn't shake the sinking feeling in her stomach. Filing a report sounded like a good idea in theory, but what if Karen had already manipulated the narrative to paint herself as the hero? What if the authorities sided with her instead of Sarah? Still, she knew she had no choice. Sitting there and doing nothing wasn't an option. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Sarah wiped her tears and stood up. She pulled out her phone and started typing furiously, jotting down every detail she could remember about the confrontation. Timestamps, locations, exact quotes. It all poured out of her in a frantic stream of consciousness. When she finished, she sent the notes to Melissa, who promised to help however she could. By the time Sarah made it back home, night had fallen, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. The house felt eerily quiet without Lily's giggles echoing through the halls. Jake, her teenage son, looked up from his video game when he saw her face. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked, immediately sensing that something was off. Sarah hesitated, unsure of how much to tell him. He was only 16, still a kid himself, but he deserved to know what had happened. Sinking onto the couch beside him, she explained everything, her voice cracking with emotion. By the time she finished, Jake was visibly shaken. "That's insane," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know yet," Sarah admitted. "But we're not giving up. No matter what it takes, we're getting Lily back." Jake nodded firmly, determination flashing in his eyes. Then let's start planning. Whatever you need, I've got your back. For the first time since that fateful afternoon, Sarah felt a spark of hope. She might be facing the fight of her life, but she wasn't alone. With Jake by her side, and hopefully Melissa and others willing to stand up against Karen, she knew she had a chance. And she would do whatever it took to bring Lily home. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a heavy heart and a mind racing with questions. How could this have happened? What was Karen thinking? And most importantly, how could she get Lily back? The weight of the situation pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. But Sarah knew she couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. Not when her daughter needed her more than ever. Her first step was to call the police. It wasn't an easy decision. Part of her feared that involving law, enforcement would only escalate things further. After all, Karen had already proven herself to be manipulative and calculating. What if she'd already spun some elaborate story to make herself look like the hero? What if the officers believed her lies instead of the truth? Still, Sarah had no choice but to try. She dialed the non-emergency number for the local precinct and explained the situation as calmly as she could, though her voice trembled with emotion. "My neighbor took my child yesterday," she said, struggling to keep her tone steady. "She claims I'm unfit to raise her, but that's not true. I need your help getting my daughter back." The dispatcher listened patiently before asking for details, names, addresses, and any evidence Sarah might have to support her claim. Sarah rattled off everything she could think of. The time and location of the incident, Karen's accusations, even the fact that they'd been overheard by several witnesses at the park. Once the call ended, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the authorities would see through Karen's charade and return Lily to her rightful home. While waiting for the police to arrive, Sarah decided to gather as much documentation as possible. She rummaged through drawers and photo albums, pulling out anything that proved Lily was hers. Birth certificates, medical records, school enrollment forms, even old family photos showing Sarah cradling Lily as a newborn. Each item was a piece of evidence, a tangible reminder that she was Lily's mother in every way that mattered. Jake pitched in too, helping organize the documents into neat piles on the dining room table. "This is insane," he muttered under his breath as he flipped through a stack of pictures. "Who does Karen think she is, walking around and stealing kids?" "I don't know," Sarah replied wearily. "But we're going to stop her." They worked. Sarah's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Melissa and other neighbors who'd heard about the confrontation at the park. Some offered words of encouragement, while others promised to testify on Sarah's behalf if needed. One message, however, stood out among the rest. It was from Mrs. Patel, the woman whose garden gnomes had once earned Karen's ire. "Sarah," the text read, "I may know something that can help you. Call me when you can." Intrigued, Sarah immediately dialed Mrs. Patel's number. The older woman answered on the second ring, her voice warm and reassuring. "Hello, dear. I heard about what happened with Lily. Such a terrible thing." "Thank you," Sarah said gratefully. "Do you really think you can help?" "Well, I'm not sure yet," Mrs. Patel admitted. "But I do remember something strange about Karen. A few months ago, she started talking about adopting a child. At first, I thought she was joking. It didn't seem like something she'd actually do. But then she began mentioning it more often, always saying how much better off a child would be with her than with their real parents. She even brought brochures to one of our HOA meetings, claiming she wanted to educate us about fostering and adoption." Sarah's stomach churned. Could Karen's obsession with taking Lily be tied to this? Had she been planning something like this for weeks, or even months, without anyone realizing it? "I'll dig deeper," Mrs. Patel promised. "If there's anything else I find, I'll let you know right away." By the time the police arrived later that afternoon, Sarah felt slightly more prepared. 2 officers stepped out of their patrol car and approached her front door. Their expressions neutral but professional. Sarah greeted them nervously, inviting them inside and offering them seats at the dining room table where all her gathered evidence lay spread out. Officer Ramirez, a tall man with kind eyes, took charge of the conversation. Ms. Bennett, we understand you've reported a custody dispute involving your daughter, Lily. Can you walk us through what happened? Sarah nodded and recounted the events of the previous day, starting with their trip to the park and ending with Karen's shocking declaration that she intended to keep Lily. She handed over copies of the birth certificate and medical records, pointing out specific details that linked her to Lily. Officer Ramirez listened intently, jotting notes in a small notebook, while his partner, Officer Chen, examined the photographs. When Sarah finished speaking, Officer Ramirez leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed in thought. "This is unusual," he admitted cautiously. "We'll need to speak with Ms. Whitmore to get her side of the story. In the meantime, we'll file a report and reach out to Child Protective Services, CPS, to ensure Lily's safety." Sarah's heart sank. CPS involvement was exactly what she'd hoped to avoid. Though she trusted that the system existed to protect children, she also knew how easily it could be misused by someone like Karen. If Karen managed to convince CPS workers that Sarah was neglectful or unstable, it could delay, or worse, prevent Lily's return. "Please," Sarah pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. "You have to believe me. I'm her mother. I love her more than anything in the world. Karen has no right to take her." Officer Ramirez gave her a sympathetic look. "We understand your concerns, Ms. Bennett. Our priority is ensuring Lily's well-being. We'll do everything we can to resolve this quickly and fairly." Though his words were meant to reassure, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the situation was spiraling out of control. As the officers left to investigate further, she turned to Jake, tears streaming down her face. "What if they don't listen? What if they believe her, instead of me?" Jake wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "They won't," he said firmly. "Because we're going to fight back. We'll show them who Karen really is." And so, the battle began. Over the next few days, word of the incident spread like wildfire throughout the neighborhood. People whispered about it during grocery runs, discussed it over coffee, and speculated endlessly online. Some rallied behind Sarah, outraged by Karen's audacity, while others, swayed by her polished exterior and reputation within the HOA, questioned whether Sarah truly deserved custody of Lily. Karen, meanwhile, wasted no time capitalizing on the attention. She held impromptu meetings with other residents, spinning tales of Sarah's supposed negligence and emotional instability. According to Karen, Sarah was a distracted mother who prioritized work over her children, leaving them vulnerable to harm. She even went so far as to suggest that Lily had confided in her about feeling neglected, a blatant lie that made Sarah's blood boil. To bolster her case, Karen filed a formal complaint with CPS, alleging that Sarah posed a risk to her daughter's safety. The allegations ranged from minor infractions like failing to supervise Lily adequately to more serious claims of emotional abuse. It was clear that Karen had done her homework, crafting a narrative designed to cast doubt on Sarah's abilities. As a parent, Sarah, however, refused to sit idly by while Karen smeared her name. With Melissa's help, she organized a counter-campaign, reaching out to friends, neighbors, and coworkers who could vouch for her character. Together, they compiled testimonials, attesting to Sarah's dedication as a mother, her tireless work ethic, and her unwavering love for her children. One particularly powerful letter came from Mrs. Patel, who recounted Karen's bizarre fixation on adoption and her frequent criticisms of other parents in the neighborhood. Another came from Sarah's boss at the cafe, praising her reliability and commitment despite juggling multiple responsibilities. Even Jake wrote a heartfelt note, describing how hard his mom worked to provide for him and Lily, and how much joy she brought to their lives. Armed with these letters, along with the official documents proving her parental rights, Sarah submitted her response to CPS. She also requested a meeting with the caseworker assigned to her case, hoping to explain her side of the story directly. The meeting took place in a sterile conference room at the CPS office, where Sarah sat across from a young woman named Rachel, whose demeanor was polite but guarded. Rachel asked probing questions about Sarah's parenting style, her work schedule, and her relationship with Lily. Though Sarah answered honestly, She couldn't ignore the nagging fear that Karen's influence might overshadow the truth. As the days dragged on, tensions in the neighborhood reached a boiling point. Arguments erupted between those who supported Sarah and those who sided with Karen. Flyers appeared on doorsteps, urging residents to stand up for Lily or demand accountability. Social media posts fueled the fire, turning the entire ordeal into a public spectacle. Through it all, Sarah remained focused on one goal: bringing Lily home. She visited the CPS office daily, following up on her case and providing additional evidence whenever possible. She spoke with lawyers, researching her legal options and preparing for the possibility of a custody hearing. She even reached out to local news outlets, hoping to shine a spotlight on Karen's actions and garner public support. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but Sarah refused to give up. Every night, as she tucked Jake into bed and kissed his forehead, she whispered a silent promise to Lily: "I'm coming for you." As the days turned into weeks, the custody battle between Sarah and Karen grew more intense, dividing the neighborhood into two distinct camps. On one side were those who believed Sarah was a loving, responsible mother, caught in an absurd nightmare. They saw Karen as a power-hungry bully whose obsession with control had spiraled out of hand. On the other side were Karen's supporters, people swayed by her reputation as the perfect suburban mom, or intimidated by her influence within the HOA. To them, Sarah was reckless and neglectful, someone unworthy of raising a child. The tension spilled over into every corner of the community. Parents whispered behind closed doors about whose side they were on. Flyers appeared taped to lampposts and mailboxes, some accusing Karen of kidnapping, while others questioned Sarah's fitness as a parent. Social media became a battleground, with heated arguments erupting in comment sections and group chats. Even local businesses weren't spared. Customers debated loudly in coffee shops and grocery stores, turning mundane errands into opportunities for confrontation. Sarah tried her best to ignore the chaos around her, focusing instead on preparing for the upcoming court hearing. It felt surreal to think that her role as Lily's mother would be decided by strangers sitting in a courtroom. But she knew she couldn't afford to lose this fight, not when it meant losing her daughter forever. With Melissa's help, Sarah hired a lawyer named Mr. Carter, a seasoned family law attorney known for his sharp mind and compassionate approach. From their very first meeting, Mr. Carter assured Sarah that they had a strong case. "We'll present clear evidence proving your parental rights," he explained confidently. "Birth certificates, medical records, testimonies from friends, and family, it all adds up. The burden is on Karen to prove otherwise, and based on what you've told me, I doubt she has much to stand on." Still, Mr. Carter warned Sarah not to underestimate Karen. "She seems determined to win at any cost," he said. "That makes her unpredictable. We need to anticipate her moves and prepare accordingly." Over the next few weeks, Sarah worked tirelessly alongside Mr. Carter, gathering documents, rehearsing her testimony, and strategizing how to counter Karen's claims. Jake helped too, staying late after school to organize files and proofread letters. Though the stress weighed heavily on both of them, they found solace in knowing they were fighting together for Lily. Meanwhile, Karen was busy building her own defense. She hired a high-profile attorney, Ms. Reynolds, whose reputation for winning difficult cases preceded her. With sleek suits and an air of authority, Ms. Reynolds exuded confidence, often dismissing Sarah's efforts as emotional manipulation. In public statements, Karen doubled down on her accusations, painting herself as a selfless guardian stepping in where Sarah had failed. To bolster her narrative, Karen began circulating rumors about Sarah's past. She claimed Sarah had a history of instability, citing anonymous sources who supposedly witnessed her struggling to cope with single parenthood. One particularly damaging rumor alleged that Sarah had once left Lily alone overnight while working late shifts. Though completely fabricated, these stories spread quickly, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of those unfamiliar with Sarah's true character. When Sarah learned about these allegations, she was devastated. How could Karen stoop so low? Each lie felt like another blow to her already fragile state. But rather than crumbling under the pressure, Sarah channeled her anger into action. With Mr. Carter's guidance, she tracked down witnesses who could refute Karen's claims, including former co-workers and neighbors who had seen Sarah juggle work and parenting with grace and determination. One key witness was Mrs. Patel, who agreed to testify about Karen's fixation on adoption and her frequent criticisms of other parents. Another was Sarah's landlord, who confirmed that she had never received complaints about noise or disturbances from Sarah's home. Together, these testimonies painted a picture of a devoted mother unfairly targeted by someone seeking to impose her will. The night before the trial, Sarah barely slept. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if the judge sided with Karen? What if Lily never came home? Every time she closed her eyes, she pictured her daughter crying out for her, trapped in Karen's sterile, overly controlled world. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched a photo of Lily, willing herself to stay strong. Jake stayed awake with her, offering quiet words of encouragement. "You're gonna crush it tomorrow, Mom," he said firmly. "Lily knows you love her, and so does everyone else who matters. Don't let Karen get inside your head." Sarah nodded, grateful for her son's unwavering support. "I won't," she whispered. "For Lily." The courtroom was packed the following morning, filled with curious neighbors, reporters, and even strangers drawn by the drama unfolding in their sleepy suburb. Cameras flashed outside the courthouse as Sarah walked, in her head held high despite the weight of the moment. Beside her, Mr. Carter carried a stack of folders containing their carefully prepared evidence. Karen arrived shortly after, flanked by Ms. Reynolds and a small entourage of supporters. Dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit, Karen looked every bit the poised professional she claimed to be. Yet beneath her polished exterior lay a simmering intensity, an unyielding belief that she was right and everyone else was wrong. As the trial began, Judge Miller presided over the proceedings with calm authority, ensuring both sides had equal opportunity to present their cases. Mr. Carter opened with a powerful statement, emphasizing Sarah's undeniable parental rights and refuting Karen's baseless accusations. He called several witnesses, including Mrs. Patel and Sarah's landlord, each providing compelling accounts of Sarah's dedication as a mother. But when it was Karen's turn to speak, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Standing at the podium, Karen delivered a tearful monologue, portraying herself as a concerned citizen forced to intervene in a dire situation. "I didn't want to do this," she sobbed, clutching a tissue. "But when I saw Lily sitting alone, on that swing, abandoned and vulnerable, I knew I couldn't stand by and do nothing. As a mother myself, I understand the importance of protecting children, even if it means making difficult decisions." Her performance earned murmurs of sympathy from parts of the audience, but Sarah remained steadfast, refusing to let Karen's theatrics sway her focus. When it was her turn to take the stand, Sarah spoke with raw honesty, recounting the events at the park and explaining how Karen's actions had shattered her family. Her voice trembled with emotion as she described the pain of being separated from Lily, but her resolve never wavered. Throughout the trial, text messages exchanged between Karen and various neighbors surfaced as evidence, revealing a pattern of obsessive behavior directed at Sarah. In one message, Karen threatened to make Sarah's life a living hell unless she complied with HOA demands. In another, she boasted about her ability to manipulate situations to her advantage. These revelations exposed cracks in Karen's carefully constructed facade, undermining her credibility in the eyes of the court. Ms. Reynolds attempted to salvage Karen's case by questioning Sarah's financial struggles and hectic work schedule, implying they made her unfit to care for Lily. But Mr. Carter countered effectively, highlighting Sarah's resourcefulness and resilience in the face of adversity. He reminded the judge that being a single parent wasn't easy, but it certainly didn't equate to neglect. By the end of the day, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Judge Miller prepared to deliver his verdict. Both Sarah and Karen sat rigidly in their seats, their expressions masks of hope and fear. Finally, the judge spoke, his voice steady and commanding. "After reviewing the evidence presented today," he began, "it is abundantly clear that Ms. Bennett is Lily's legal and rightful mother. There is no credible basis for Ms. Whitmore's claims of negligence or emotional instability. Furthermore, Ms. Whitmore's actions demonstrate a reckless disregard for the law and the well-being of the child involved. He paused, fixing Karen with a stern gaze. Attempting to take a child from their parent without proper cause is unconscionable. Such behavior undermines the foundation of trust and safety upon which our society relies. Therefore, I rule in favor of Ms. Bennett, granting her full custody of Lily. The room erupted in murmurs as Sarah broke down in tears of relief. Justice had been served, or so it seemed. But as Karen stormed out of the courtroom, her face twisted with fury, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't truly over. For now, though, she allowed herself a moment of peace, knowing she was one step closer to bringing Lily home.